Hi guys, how's it going? My name is Emily Penelope and I'm a third year medical student at the University of Auckland in New Zealand. Today I just wanted to talk to you about something called the MMIs. So I've had a few questions on Instagram and YouTube about UCAT and the MMIs, and I thought I'd just make a video about the MMIs. Today I've got a few notes that I've written up here on the MMIs. So if you didn't know, in the University of Auckland, to get into medical school, there are multiple components. The first component is sitting the first year of the Bachelor of Health Science or the Bachelor of Science in Biomedical Science, and that is your GPA. And if you want to learn more about that, go and watch my video on Health Science versus Biomed first year, everything you need to know. I'll link that below. It's also, another facet is the UCAT, and the other facet is the MMIs. So to get into medical school, 60 or 65% is your GPA, your grades across your 4 core subjects. 15% is the UCAT and 25% is the MMIs. So it's a quarter of, I guess, the overall profile that you create to get into medical school. So it's quite an important part, and you might be asking, what is the MMI? So MMI stands for multiple mini interviews. It is part of the selection process for people applying to any clinical program. So that's apart from nursing, so that's like optometry, pharmacy, medical imaging, medicine, dietetics, audiology, nutrition, like that sort of thing. And the point of these interviews is to assess you as a whole person and let you present yourself, and to engage with staff from the faculty and the wider health community. So it's just about getting to know you better, and actually gives you a better chance of getting into a clinical program of your dreams. The faculty actually says that the interview boosts your chances at an opportunity to enter a clinical program. So it's definitely an amazing place to prove who you are, more than just grades, because UCAT is also a grade. The interview process allows for a broad sampling of abilities and is tailored to delve deeper into the attributes that matter in a future health professional. The interview process is less prone to gender and culture bias, and is an efficient use of time when it comes to deciding who will get the limited places in the clinical programs. It is less amenable to coaching than UCAT and first year, and surprisingly, interviewers and applicants actually both enjoy the process. I know that I quite enjoyed the process because you've done the hard yards, and then this was the time to prove yourself. So how do you get selected to even do an MMI? The year I did the interviews, these were the number of spots available for each program and GPA required to apply. Note that this does differ year to year, especially with the GPA, as every cohort has different averages. I know that this year the average is probably going to be quite high because of coronavirus and a lot of subjects going online and tests and exams going online. People did a lot better than was expected, I guess. So these are just the numbers the year I did it. They may have increased or decreased slightly, but it's definitely going to be similar. So for a Bachelor of Pharmacy, there were 100 domestic places, 10 international places, and the eligibility to apply was a GPA of 4 or above, and eligibility for interview was a GPA of 4 across the 4 cores. If you don't know what the cores are, go and watch my last video on Health Science versus Biomed to learn more about that. For a Bachelor of Medical Imaging, there were 20 domestic places, no international places, although that definitely could have changed. It was new. It was the first year you could do it, the year I applied to clinical programs. Undergraduate entry is only via Biomed, and you need a GPA above a 5, and there are 7 cores in the GPA calculation. So I assume that's every paper apart from your Gen Ed. For a Bachelor of Optometry, there were 55 domestic places, and a GPA above a 6 was required to apply, and that was across 6 core papers, and I'm unsure exactly what papers those were. You would have to go and check on the Bachelor of Optometry page. For the Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery, the MBCHB, which I know a lot of you people are here on my channel to learn more about, there were 257 domestic places and 35 international places. You need a GPA average of above 6 to apply, and for MMI you are ranked by the 4 core GPA. And I did talk in my last video in Health Science vs Biomed about what the grade cutoffs were for interview, and you can go and check that on fyi.org. Go to my last video, the link's in that. I'm going to break down entrance into med school a little bit. So I already talked about the 4 core GPA, your MMI score, and your UCAT score. You also have to do the Vulnerable Children Act safety check and police vetting. So the interview, remember, is worth 25%, so it's very important. So now you want to know, how does the MMI work? What happens when I show up? What do I do? What's it like? What do I wear? So the MMI is broken down into cycles, morning and afternoon, with 6 sessions per cycle. And this is across approximately 8 days. They are interviewing approximately 850 people at approximately 96 a day. There is regular changing of scenarios and random changing of attributes. So I'm going to talk about those a little bit later on. On the day, you assemble in a waiting area, and then you are assigned a student helper who is kind of like your escort, and they take you around the station so you can't get lost. They'll escort you first to the first station, and you will sit down outside. There are 3 bells. So at the first bell, you are given a scenario card. At the second bell, you enter the interview room, and at the third bell, you exit, and your escort/helper will take you to the next station, and then you kind of repeat the process. And then at the end, your helper escorts you back to the waiting area, and then you get called to do the police vetting and this little quiz thing. There are 8 stations, and they're each in their own small clinical skills room. And if you have been to Grafton and done MedSci labs, then it's just around the corner from the MedSci labs. If you go into the bathroom and you look down the hall, there's lots of little rooms on the side. So they're in those rooms, or they were when I did it. Hopefully this year interviews aren't done over Zoom or anything. I hope that they're still in person, no matter what the level is, because I can't imagine how hard it would be as a student to do interviews over Zoom. It would be so difficult to prove yourself. So each station is 8 minutes each, and this includes 2 minutes for reading the question and 6 minutes for answering. There is 1 interviewer per station. And the stations are as follows. So remember that this information is correct as of 2019 entry. We're now going into 2021 entry, and I assume that pretty much nothing will have changed, but there's no guarantee. There is the personal experience station, personal insight, moral/ethical issue, social conscience issue, healthcare topic, hora Maori, career choice, and an interactive station. So the interactive station is an acting station where it differs slightly from the rest, as you get 2 minutes to read, 4 minutes with an actor while the interviewer observes, and 2 minutes reflection with the interviewer. And they do not require you to act in a highly emotive situation. They're quite basic situations. They just want to see how you, cope in a real life scenario. So you might be wondering, who are these people interviewing me? How do they have the right to judge, me and what I'm doing? So the interviewers are mostly health professionals that have an interest in people and the future of their professions, and they know nothing about you except your name. They don't know what category, they don't know what degree you're doing, what program you're applying for, your GPA or UCAT score, or your ranking based on your GPA. And if they ask you, you actually do not need to answer. However, if they ask what you are interested in, I find that talking to them about my hopes and aspirations and the course I want to do and what I want for my career actually helps to build rapport with the interviewer and fill in a bit of time if there is spare, because I know that for a couple of my stations, like I finished early and I was like, do you have any more questions for me? And they were like, no, that was great, la la la. And then so we just got talking like, oh, so what are you applying for? And I'm like, oh, I've applied for medicine. And they're like, oh, anything else? And I was like, no, just medicine, that's what I want to do. And they're like, oh my god, good luck, la la la. Like, and then they talked a bit about themselves, and it just built rapport and made the time go quicker, I guess. You might be asking, like, what do they know about the topics that they're questioning you on? So they are not subject matter experts by any means. They do not get the scenario in advance, and there's no list of right and wrong answers. They do have some prompts to keep the conversation going, but let me tell you, there is usually a difficult interviewer who stays quite quiet and staunch and expects you to do most of the talking, and it's usually only one, and they don't really give you any prompts even though they're supposed to, but sometimes they just like to be like a hard ass kind of. All I can say with an interview like this is stick to your guns and don't take their attitude that they are putting on. Don't let that put you off to the extent that like you change your ideas. That's not good. Like, go in with the idea of, this is what I believe, this is what I think, like I want to answer that question like, and just stick to your guns. And if they just ask, because they can be kind of like a little bit rude sometimes and say, was that it? And you could say, well, that's everything I wanted to say. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask me about it? If like you don't know what to say, or you could say, yes, although if I could think of some ways to expand on this, it would probably be this, this, and this. And I think it's important in those cases, like, not to really like change up your mind too much. Like, don't get thrown off. Show them that you're confident and you don't get thrown off by other people's demeanors. The interviewers are not going to assess how you've done so far, how much stress you can take, unless they're like a little bit mean, like the mean one, or how big a hole you can dig yourself into, or your suitability for a particular program. They are assessing you for 3 attributes per station, and no other attributes than the 3 that are specified to them. So I know what you're going to ask now. Well, what are they assessing in the interviews, and what are these attributes? They are looking for information about you across 14 of these different attributes. They are, I'm just going to list them here: awareness of health issues, career motivation, communication, conflict resolution, creativity, critical thinking, cultural safety, empathy, ethical and moral reasoning, quality of argument, self-awareness, self-care, social responsibility, and teamwork. So I want to explain on those question types that I kind of briefly touched on before. I listed them to you, and how these attributes are assessed within the question types. So for example, let's start with a social conscience question. An example of a question could be, in New Zealand, prisoners are unable to vote. The law used to be that prisoners serving a sentence of 3 years or more could not vote, but in 2010 this was extended to all those in prison at the time of an election. Is voting a privilege that prisoners have lost? Should it be the right of all prisoners? What are your thoughts? So this question is assessing the quality of your argument. This means that there is no right or wrong answer, but you need to be able to back yourself up with good reasoning that makes sense. And when questioned why for your reasoning, you need to know why. It is assessing critical thinking, and this will also be showcased in your reasoning, as it requires thoughts about human rights, as well as social responsibility. How do you feel about prisoners, and what rights should they have? You could argue that prisoners should have a right to vote because the government is also representing them as humans and citizens of New Zealand. Or you could argue the other way, that disenfranchisement is needed as prisoners have broken their social contract and have thereby given up their right to participate in a civil society. That is for you to argue, and neither answer is right or wrong. There is a lot you could talk about, but make sure you pick one way and don't necessarily change your mind too easily, as they are looking for the quality of your argument. And if you chop and change easily, they may mark you lower in that attribute. Next up, I want to talk about the interactive station. The key points for this station are not getting cross or belligerent, as the actor will do the same. If you raise your voice, so will the actor. If you raise your voice, so will the actor. So just remember, stay calm, keep cool. So, an example of a scenario for this station could be: a school friend knows that you want to be a health professional, but questions the value of a university education. Speak to your friend who is in the room. They will often give the person a name, so they'll say, your school friend Jamie knows that you want to be a health professional, whatever. So you go in with a name. Hi Jamie, how's it going? La la la. What do you think this question's testing? So this scenario is testing communication, empathy, and conflict resolution. This scenario requires listening, which is part of good communication, as well as empathizing with your friend and understanding their side of the argument or discussion, as well as coming to a conclusion that you may agree to disagree, or perhaps you may have swayed their mind on the situation. Communication, empathy, and conflict resolution are often tested in the interactive station. Some other scenarios, I'll just give you an example for interactive stations, and you could practice these at home with friends or family if you're sitting the MMIs this year. You have been invited to a kids' football match by your neighbour. During the game, your neighbour is running up and down the sideline, shouting not very kind things. You don't think he was doing the right thing at a kid's game. You need to go and discuss this with your neighbour. That's another scenario. And then this one, a homeless man is asking you for money. You need to discuss this with the homeless man. So for this scenario, it's better to talk about how the man came to be homeless, what it's like, and what his circumstances are. If you ask about sensitive subjects such as drugs and alcohol, you will come across as quite combative. So try to listen and be as empathetic as you can. And you will need to justify your position via a reasonable debate. I'm just going to go a little bit quicker because otherwise this video is going to be super long. But onto the moral/ethical question. An example could be, animals are often used for scientific or commercial testing of drugs. Some people oppose this practice while others believe it is justified. What are your thoughts? So this question is judging quality of argument, ethical/moral reasoning, and social responsibility. Again, this question is looking at the quality of your argument, your ethical moral reasoning, and social responsibility. Remember to use your 2 minutes to essentially pick a side and have good reasons why you picked that side. Think like the interviewer. I want to say that for all questions, you should think like the interviewer. What questions could they ask to pick apart your argument? If you were the interviewer and naturally opposed the students' arguments, what are some things that you would ask or say to dismantle the argument? So think of that, preempt them, and have some answers prepared in your mind. If you've ever done debating, it's kind of like when you're listening to the other side speak, you're making a rebuttal already. So it's almost like have a rebuttal in your head ready to go for when the interviewer does ask some questions like that. Let's talk next about the career choice question. So they could ask something along the lines of, do you think that non-academic hobbies or pastimes can add to a person's ability to be a good health professional? Can you think of an example in your case? So this is looking at the attributes of career motivation, self-awareness, and creativity. They want to see that you realize the importance of a work-life balance and that you are capable of looking after yourself. They want to see how you de-stress when times get tough and that you will be able to handle the hurdles that happen once you enter a clinical program. And then moving on to the healthcare question, here is an example. Alternative or complementary medicine refers to any therapeutic approach that does not fall within the realm of conventional medicine. They are used by about half of the adult population in the developed world, yet firm proof for the effects many popular alternative therapies are claimed to have are lacking. So do you think that alternative medicines pose a threat to health? This question is assessing ethical/moral reasoning, awareness of health issue, and self-care. You need to understand that you are applying for entry into a westernized method of clinical teaching and one that does not teach you about alternative medicines. You need to acknowledge, if this is the case for you, and may be likely because you have applied to a clinical program, you need to acknowledge that you do not know about alternative medicines and whether they could cause reaction or even be poisonous in certain dosage. I did a ward round in dermatology last year and saw a horrible reaction to a single Chinese herb. A young person almost died, had spent quite a bit of time in ICU, and it was really scary that one herbal medication could do this. So you could perhaps, in this question, what you could talk about is that perhaps more peer-reviewed research needs to be done on alternative medications before you would support them as a therapy for your patients, but it is really up to you whether you believe they pose a threat to health. I would say that they do have the potential to pose a threat, but you could definitely argue the other way. That's my personal opinion, and I do use some alternative medications, and I do things like acupuncture, osteopathy, take some Chinese herbs, go to a naturopath. I do that as well. So it's kind of, you need to balance up what you truly believe in and just understand that the university places a lot of pride in its peer-reviewed research, and that it's mostly those westernized medications that are studied in research, and there's less research about the complementary alternative medicines. So that's just something that you could do some research on, I guess, and come up with a stance how you feel. The next question is the personal insight question. A study from the American College Health Association reported that 75% of students are stressed and nearly all say they are anxious. What are your tactics for dealing with times of stress and anxiety? This question is examining self-awareness, creativity, and self-care. Talk about your strengths, or even talk about things you don't do so well, and what are you going to do to compensate for those weaknesses. Talk about how you feel about things and what you do. So for this example, you could talk about exercise, listening to music, saying no, and avoiding people that create stress in your life. The next question I want to talk about is the personal experience question. And this one, an example could be, modern day healthcare is very much a team effort. Think of a role that you have played in the team. What was your contribution? What did it teach you about team working? So this is a very important question, as teamwork is extremely important in healthcare delivery. It is examining teamwork, obviously, self-awareness, and conflict resolution. You could be a leader or a follower, have a big involvement or a little involvement in teamwork, and you could think of more than one role or team situation you are in. I always talk about cooperation and listening to others, as those are the attributes they are testing, and it is good to showcase other attributes such as communication, even if they're not really testing that attribute. The next question, and the last type of question I want to talk about briefly, is the Hauora Māori question. So the Hauora Māori question is a very important question as it relates to our Indigenous Māori population here in Aotearoa, and requires you to understand what inequities they face and why they're facing those inequities. So you need to think back to the basic causes like colonisation, te tiriti, and cultural suppression. If you are an international student, perhaps read up on these topics. So here is a question you could get, say, in relation to Hauora Māori. A lack of affordable housing is leading to many Māori whānau/families across Aotearoa, New Zealand, needing emergency housing options. Some Māori whānau are now sleeping in their cars. What are the factors that have contributed to this housing crisis for Māori communities in particular? So this is examining you on critical thinking, social responsibility, and cultural safety. You need to think about the factors: socioeconomic status, discrimination, inequities, bias, income levels, think deeper than the surface and really delve into what the root causes are. I guess that's all I have to say on the question types. Now, I know you're wondering about, you said that they're like examining or scoring us on our attributes. How are they scoring us? So, like I said before, there's 3 attributes that are being assessed per station, and each is scored on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being completely unacceptable and 10 being exceptional. The range overall for your score for your interviews is 24 to 240 overall, and there are no must-haves or must-not-haves within that marking. So the marking is broken down like this: 10, as well as can be imagined, 7 to 9, superior, 5 to 6, average, 2 to 4, below average, and 1, as poorly as can be imagined. So you might ask, how can I prepare for the MMIs? What can I do? I want to be really ready. I want to go and knowing exactly what they're going to ask, and I've prepared all my answers exactly what they want to hear. Well, unfortunately, you can never know what they're going to ask. You can practice answering questions with a 2-minute timer. It can be quite difficult, so practice with friends, practice with family, and practice being confident. The interviews will generally be nice to you, apart from the occasional one that likes to pretend they're mean, but trust me, they are nice underneath. Be yourself. Smile and engage with the interviewers. Build rapport, even though it's a short amount of time. It's really important. And enjoy it. If you are enjoying it, it will show. The time will fly by. Those 8 stations of 8 minutes will be over before you know it. So I wanted to talk a little bit to you about my experience. That was just the technical side of stuff, the stuff you really wanted to know. But now I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how I found it. So, to be honest, I felt like a weight had lifted from my shoulders when I finished exams. I was so looking forward to the interviews because I knew that these were the last hurdle before getting that acceptance letter of, you have gotten into the clinical program you applied for. And in my case, I only applied for one, and it was medicine. I knew that the MMIs were all about being confident, all about being myself. So what will they ask this year? I don't know what they're going to ask this year. I imagine that there'll be definitely a question on coronavirus. There'll definitely be a question with handling stress and, how you handled the stress of university maybe in these times. Going online, the uncertainty around things, how you dealt with missing out on travel and seeing family. There's usually a current events kind of section or a question that's related to current events. So I do recommend being up to date on current events, including, what's been going on this year. I thought I would share with you the questions they asked me. Note, they're not very likely to ask these questions again, but they could give you the idea and the train of thought that you need to have when answering questions. If you want to practice, you could pause here, and when I say the question out, you could give yourself 2 minutes to think about an answer, 6 minutes to answer, come back and hear what I have to say about the question, and then continue to the next one. So I've got one question of each type. These are exactly what I was asked. I wrote them down the day I did it. So it would be good practice, to be honest, if that's what you want to do, if you want practice. So I'll get your timer ready, and 2 minutes to read the question, think about what you're going to answer, and 6 minutes to say. You can sit and do it with a friend if you want. Or if you just want to know what I was asked, then just keep listening, I guess. So I had a question. Why do people trust health professionals? So for this question, I talked about the education they have, the responsibility they have to the public, and the desire to be a public servant. I also talked about their knowledge base and how in society health professionals are well respected because you're with people at their most vulnerable times, at some of the scariest time of their life, and you're empathetic to their situation. The next question I had was this: Social media causes disconnect and loneliness. What do you think? Discuss. I talked about both sides of the argument for this one, how social media connected me with friends and family instantly from all around the world, but how some forms of social media could cause disconnect as people are really only sharing the best part of their lives. And if you watch screen time throughout the day, you definitely are spending too much time looking at social media. And that means less time connecting with others. So for that question, I did argue both sides, but I remember my interviewer for that question, and it was very much like a conversation. She didn't just sit there, listen to me, give me prompts. We had a back and forth conversation, and I know leaving that question that I answered it really well, because she just said, I don't think anyone's answered that question so well today. And I felt really proud of myself. I know they're probably not supposed to say that, but there you go. The next question I had was, do healthcare professionals contribute to inequities? I said that healthcare professionals can contribute to inequities and they need to be proactive in combating this. I talked about unconscious bias and ongoing colonisation in our healthcare system. The next question I had was this. Think of a regulation or law that doesn't exist, that should exist, and explain why. Or alternatively, think of a regulation or law that currently exists but shouldn't, and explain why. I chose a regulation or law that didn't exist, and I chose that primary care providers needed to be fully funded by the government. I argued that this would help those with accessibility issues to be able to easier access primary care. The next question I was asked, think of a time when you have experienced failures or stumbling blocks. How did you approach these? What were their effects? This is looking for personal insight on how you cope with failure. I talked about failing some important ski examinations and the effect this had on my career and the steps I took to move forwards from this. My next question was, should sugary drinks be banned on campus? Yes or no? Discuss. I said no, because as adults in a tertiary education, we have access to places outside of campus and access to education surrounding the pros and cons of sugary drinks. As an adult, our choices should be there, left for us to decide. But obviously that was my argument and my choice. If you were given this question, you could be completely free to argue the opposite. It's just completely up to you. Again, my examiner in this question was great. We had like a proper conversation. It didn't feel like a one-way thing at all. So I did really enjoy that. And okay, the next question. A patient comes into your practice with an illness and you know medication that you can prescribe that will help her get better. She wants to try herbal medications first. What do you do? For this, I think you need to understand the scope of practice of a doctor and realise that you do not learn a lot about the research surrounding herbal medications, and you aren't supplied with extensive information on herbal medications. For this question, I said that I would suggest that the patient take the prescription that I was offering, as I knew it would be a good treatment for her, but it was up to her should she take herbal medications separately from the medications I was supplied her, and that if she was going to do this, she would need to do her research and inform her GP accordingly, and that she shouldn't take it at the same time as the prescription meds. Also, if her illness got worse or wasn't getting better, she should instantly come back and we would need to rediscuss her care. But I would suggest that she take what I'm offering. Again, everyone has a different opinion on this. These are my opinions, and I'm saying what I said. I'm telling you what I said because that's what I know. I don't know the score I got in my interview, but from the vibes I was getting from the interviewers on the day, I was quite proud of my interviews and felt like I was portraying myself as an honest, reliable and confident young woman, and I was really happy with all of my answers. So last but not least was the interactive station. So this was my scenario. You are the senior charge nurse in ED on a Friday night. Alex, a 32-year-old male, has come in with his elderly mother who has dementia and a cough. She is well enough to be discharged and should just take the medications at home. Alex is her sole carer and has been managing her 24/7 for the past few months. He wants her admitted to the ward so he can have a break. Please talk to him. So I know, talking to friends who had the same scenario as me, that a lot of them brought up rest homes as an option. I didn't, so I'm unsure how well I scored in this scenario. But how I did it is I understood as a senior nurse that it would be fair for me to get another opinion from a doctor for Alex, and that I didn't necessarily have the power to discharge his mother. I talked about other options like home help, looking into the future, things like that, but it's up to you. You know, it's all about conflict resolution, showing empathy, communication, things like that. So there isn't really a right or a wrong in that situation. It's just showing that you can kind of like diffuse a situation a little bit, I guess, as well. I guess that's everything that I have really to say on the MMIs. Just remember that it is for them to get to know you as a person, who you are. They want a really wide range of people in clinical programs because you need to represent your patients. So they're not going to pick all the same sort of person to go into a clinical program. They want a really wide range of ethnicities, of intelligence, of, you know, personality, that sort of thing. So just remember, like, you're unique and they want your uniqueness in the clinical program. So just show that to them. You know, I look at the people that I'm surrounded with in medical school every day and think, wow, we're all so different. So just remember that. Be honest to yourself and be honest to them. I hope that your clinical program applications go well and that you gain access to the clinical program of your dreams, because that's what you all deserve if you're here doing research, getting ready for your next steps. And I really hope that this video helped you prepare for the MMIs and what's going to come next, and that you can take something away from this and feel like you're going into those interviews a little bit more prepared than just showing up. I did want to say I dressed professional. I wore like a mid-calf length skirt, a shirt and a blazer. I had my hair done nicely. I wore nicely the black boots. Just a professional outfit. You could wear like pants and a blouse. I know that a lot of men wore like suits or like at least a shirt with a tie and pants. It's completely up to you, but you do want to come across as like tidy and professional. And yeah, good luck is all I can say. The interviews are fun. You're almost at the end of the year. You're almost finished those hurdles of completion for what you need to do to apply. So all I can say is you're going to do great. Be yourself. I wish you all the best. If you've got questions, my Instagram is down below, so DM me on Instagram or leave a comment on this video and I will hopefully answer those, and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys, thank you so much.